All right, welcome everybody. This is our first recorded interview with a student of the month, which I'm starting this series with some of my students. And I have the pleasure of introducing you to one of my students, Nina. And Nina is one of the 10 students that is enrolled in one of my programs right now. And we've been working together for about, I'd say, 5 months. We started January. So we're coming close to the finish of the program, which will be next month. And I'm so happy to introduce Nina because she is one of the most sincere students on the group. I mean, she shows up on time, she does the work, and I'd say she's the first most of the times, if not always, I think always, right, to ask a question. And I just love that energy and enthusiasm that she brings to this group. I'd like Nina to have the opportunity to introduce herself. So, Nina, the floor is yours. Tell us a few words to our listeners and viewers.
I will. Well, thank you, Devendra, for having me. I'm honored to be your first student of the month.
Hey.
Yay! Well, let's see. I have been doing yoga since the 90s, and that's when I first did pranayama in the 90s, and I loved it, and I loved yoga right away. And I unfortunately haven't had the opportunity to do as much pranayama once I left the yoga studio that I was with at the time and moved to another country, actually. And so when I got the opportunity to take your class, I was very excited because here was a great opportunity for me to not only get back to practicing pranayama, but to learn so much about it. And breathing was featuring much more prominently in my life, once again, the way things move in cycles, that had come back around because now I do energy work. And the kind of energy work I do is called quantum touch. And in quantum touch, we use breath to amplify energy. So I thought this is a great time for me to learn more ways to control my breath. There are some breathing techniques that we're taught in quantum touch, and actually one of them is a lot like Kapalabhati, the fire breath, where it's the fast breath that comes out. And not surprisingly, the breathing techniques that I've enjoyed the most while we've been doing this have been the ones that elevate your energy. Those are the ones that have resonated the most with me. I could probably use the ones that balance my energy the most. But the ones that I've really enjoyed are the ones that raise my energy. Yeah, and it's been a great learning opportunity. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say we're wearing the same colored shirt, and we didn't talk to each other this morning. This is not planned, you guys. This is just a coincidence. Maybe the energy is
Yes,
working right here.
yes,
So
exactly. And you know what chakra this is, right? This is the
yeah, yeah,
crown chakra,
exactly,
the five.
exactly. Yes, yes. So Nina, that's very interesting. I think you already had so much experience. You talked about having yoga experience for, I'd say, almost like 20 years. That's what you said. Um,
Yes.
and describe what kind of breath work had you done with other lineages, and what was your experience there?
Mm-hmm. So the yoga that I first learned how to do and was literally thrown into, I was curious about yoga, and a friend of mine took me to an ashram. It's Shivananda Yoga, to one of their ashrams. And when you get there, you do yoga 2 times a day, every day. I had never done a lick of yoga. And here I was, practicing with these people who can do the most amazing things. So I learned quickly. And in Shivananda, all of their classes are an hour and a half, and you always do what they call Analoma Viloma, which is like Nadi Shodhana, except you have the holding of the breath, the Kumbhaka, and you do Kapalabhati. And you do that every single class before you do yoga. So that's when I started doing it, and I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed, especially with the when you do Kapalabhati, you do a round of it, and then you hold your breath, and you do the Kumbhaka, and you hold your breath for an extent, whether you can or not, which is something very different from what I've learned from you. They just throw you in there, and everyone around you is holding the breath for about, count of 30. Some people would even hold you till about 45, just, straight off the bat. But I loved it, and I loved kind of the serenity and the peace that would come to my mind while holding my breath in that moment. It was really powerful for me. And those were the two breathing techniques. And then Ujjayi breathing, they didn't really teach it. They just told you to do it while you were doing yoga, and they would cue it. At power yoga, they maybe don't cue it as much. Some teachers do, and some teachers don't. In Shivananda, it was always where you were breathing, and they kept saying, breathe louder. So I don't remember if they ever told us how to do Ujjayi breathing, but they encouraged it and they fostered it.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting because these traditional lineages, the teachings of pranayama, the way that it's taught in traditional lineages, it's kind of assuming that you are an ardent asana practitioners, that you know some of these breathing techniques. But we tend to forget that yoga in this day and age is really focusing on mostly the postural aspects of yoga, these higher limbs that of pranayama or pratyahara, even sense withdrawal. Meditation, I know people do a lot of meditation, but the way the traditional lineages do meditation is really they build you up to it. So once you have the asana practice to a certain level, that's the time that you start building up the pranayama practice, and from there on, you climb on to the higher branches of yoga, limbs of yoga. But it's very interesting that you said that the way the breath holding is taught there, that you assume that you're going to be able to hold the breath for 30 seconds or even 45 seconds, but you know that how difficult. Exactly, and breath holding, as I teach it most of the time, is an art, right? It's you need to know a lot of about it, and the reason why I tell it it's an art, because imagine a potter, working with clay and trying to pot, let's say, make a vessel or something. An experienced potter can even close the eyes and go with the feeling of how the clay feels in the hand. It's very similar to breathwork, right? You have to experience it. And unless you understand how to build those pillars, what we call the pillars of breathwork, you don't get to a point where you start experiencing your own breath intuitively. And at that point, you can determine whether you want to hold the breath for like 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Because holding the breath for an extended period of time really takes a long practice. And now there's a lot out there these days. Teachers are teaching breath holding for even like 2 minutes. And I have experienced that it's such a tricky practice to get into, because if you rush into holding the breath, you can throw your mind and body out of sync. It's that powerful. The breath retention is one of the most powerful practices. And in classical pranayamas, that's what's defined as pranayama. Pranayama is not the inhale, not the exhale, but what happens in between the inhale and the exhale.
No need.
So let's build on that, Lena. So let's talk about the way that you were practicing in the Shivananda lineage, which is a very respectable lineage. I think they have centers around the world, and they've done great work. So let's actually talk about the way that they have taught breath work versus the some of the methods that you have learned from breath holding with Cultivate Prana. So could you talk a little bit about the differences and what has helped you? If there's something that maybe the Shivananda lineage has taught you, which is really helpful, and then there's something that you learned from Cultivate Prana, which helped you to actually solidify the breath holding practice.
Yes. Well, one thing I would say that I appreciate about what Shivananda does is they don't have time before each yoga class to explain to people, what the breathing is, etc. Conversely, the fact that they do it every class before the asanas start, and they encourage it during asanas, means that you do it. And if they took the time, if they could only do it when they could teach you, then they wouldn't be doing it regularly. So there is the drawback that you really do lose some of the important information you may need for proper technique and understanding of what you're experiencing, and to consciously be experiencing and controlling what's happening. And then the other side is you get the practice of it, and maybe their attitude. And I have found this a lot with Shivananda is you need to be a student. And if you're interested, then you need to seek out the information and, ask questions and go. The downside is what we discovered with your class when we all met in person is that I had mentioned to you when we were doing, it was actually the Viloma class. We were doing Viloma, and I had mentioned to you that when I try to breathe in, that I feel like there's a block right here, and I couldn't take in more energy. And I have felt that block, I mean, from what I can remember, at least 7 years. But once we figured out, which I'll get to, you and I in the class, which was awesome, we all figured out what was happening. I wonder if it goes back to never being taught the proper way to hold the breath. And when we all met together, and leading up to when we met together, your focus, I went back and I watched that recording from that day when I had asked you about this block that I would feel. So for those of you listening, I would inhale, and we'd have to inhale and then hold the kumbhaka, hold the breath, and then take a little slurp of air like through a straw before we exhaled to take the edge off of the transition. And I couldn't do it because I felt like my lungs were so full. And for years, when I'd been inhaling even just the 3-part breath, I would feel a block right about here. Like all of a sudden, my breath would just stop, and it felt like a physical block. And then when we all met in person, well, rewind. Before that, I had asked you, and you sat there and you very clearly both physically demonstrated to us and explained to me how your rib cage moves, how your shoulders, your clavicle moves, and all of that gave me something to think about. Breathing into your back, that was an important part that I was not doing. So taking the time, having the time to ask you one-on-one about this long-term issue that I had, this limitation, and then you very slowly breaking down the anatomy of just, a big deep inhale, that gave me things to think about. And then when we met in person, the whole group came around me. You remember you had originally taped me, and you could see that there was that pause, and that when I exhaled, there was like a sound, like a release of something. And among all of you, we figured out, I think it was 4 things that I am now able to breathe without the block, which to me, like, it's worth your whole class just now that I have figured out what this was, because it's been plaguing me consciously, I've been aware of it for about 7 years. And you figured out that one, I was closing what was I called? I forgot that, God, now I can't even remember his name. Scott had said, yeah, there's something in your throat that I was closing. I can't remember the name of it, but I was closing that.
The glottis.
Here. The glottis. That's what it is. I was closing the glottis. And that I think I started doing, now that I look back, when I learned Kapalabhati, and I would hold it for 30 seconds. I think I was closing the glottis. And then also my hands were too far forward on my knees. I kind of have short arms. And I was reaching them to my knees because that's what I was told to do. Rest your hands on your knees. Well, that was making me kind of arch forward a little bit. And my back wasn't as straight as it could be. So I pulled my arms back and my shoulders went back more. And then Sue had said, with the tip of your head up, and you have to bring your chin down, and that we tend to, which she was right, we tend to think we're doing that when we're not. And so her direction was, when you think you're doing it, do it a little more. And it was right. I did a little more, and then the top of my head truly was pointed up. And then you had said, extend your neck in the back, which I do now. I do that really, meaningfully, purposefully I do stretch my neck a little bit too before I do pranayama now, which also my neck and shoulders, which also helps loosen up. And then when you put your hands on my back and you said breathe into your back, because I was just trying to fill like under the clavicle here, never thought of filling the back of my lungs. And so now I do the front and the back with my neck straight and my head up, and I consciously do not close my glottis, and I can do it. I can breathe all the way to a full count of 4, and I don't feel that block anymore.
Yeah, and that makes me so happy, Nina, to hear that. Sorry, my cell phone is just going off here. And people listening to this interview. So in the traditional lineages, as you know, Nina, I think you have to sort out a teacher, right? I think this is how yoga was handed, from teacher to the student, and then that student became a teacher and then handed over. And it's still the same in some of the lineages such as the Shivananda, because if you are really a serious seeker, they would actually teach you some of the techniques that me and my team are offering through Cultivate Prana. But I think one important thing that you brought up is the group support. So our platform is, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the online platform as well. But for those listening, we have this online platform where we would discuss the breath work on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis right now, which gives these students enough opportunity to explore the breath work on it. Because as I mentioned to you before, knowing the science of breath really helps. But then at the end of the day, you have to do the work. Yeah. You have to put in all those hours to experience what's happening with your body. Because it's just not only you breathing, but you are actually going one layer above. So you're really crossing the gross and the subtle body, right? You're coming into these subtle body practices, so which is your world of, Nina, the chakras and the energy healing. And in order for somebody to step into that realm, you really have to get in tune with your own breathing and understand what is the energetic sensations of the breath. So several things that Nina said are really important to understanding breath work, because it's not only the science, but also the experience of the breath work, what is the energy around a certain practice, and then having the group support. So you have the online platform to discuss all the breath work. You've been given everything there is to know about the science of that particular breath, and then have ample opportunity to go and practice on your own. Plus, then the group will help you. Because as a teacher, I learned so much from you guys, because there were certain things that I couldn't pick up, but somebody in the group would be able to pick up, like subtle things about, hey, the position of the head, right? Where is your chin? Is it low or up? Or the thing that Scott brought up with you constricting your glottis too much. I would not have thought about it. So it's the group support that becomes so important, because you're sharing this energetic practice. And it just makes me so happy to see, because I could see, that's why I recorded you during our one-on-one sessions, just to make sure that you see where are you holding that breath. And it's so easier. It becomes so easy once you see, okay, where does the correction need to happen? Then you can work towards it. Because unless you even know what am I doing incorrectly, you would not be able to consciously go in and correct it. So it's all about allowing the students to have all those tools, tools of practicing on your own, plus the tools of the online resource, as well as your support group, to make sure that you advance in your practice.
Yes, and I didn't know for years. That's the essential point, is that I knew this was a problem for years, and I had no idea what to do about it. So I just lived with it, So I'd be doing 3-part breathing for wherever I was, and I'd feel it. I'm like, what is that? Why is that? It was really plaguing me.
Absolutely. And you know that we become so, because breath is so common, right? We don't think about it. That's the one thing, right? It's controlled by the autonomic nervous system, and it's an autopilot. You don't have to think about it. So many of us have these habits that we have developed over a very long period of time, that we aren't even aware that we are holding our breath, or just stopping between when we are breathing, or we are breathing abruptly. All of this, since we are running on an autopilot, We don't even recognize that those things have to be corrected. And those things are actually holding us back to have to enjoy the health, right? And not only the physical health, but the emotional and the spiritual health that comes with this kind of practice. So I want to ask you, I know that you work a lot with energy healing,
Mhm.
and I want to ask you, how are you using some of the breath techniques that you have learned with us? How are you using that in your own healing touch practice?
Well, I'll tell you a little funny story first about using it in my personal life. So my son, he's 12. He just turned 12. And he was having, a teenage morning where he felt sluggish and he didn't want to get up and help us in the yard and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of get him out in the yard and he's dragging his feet around. And I said, all right, we're going to do Bastrika.
I
Right,
love
put
that.
your hands up and down, and then forward, and made him spread his legs out, and he did it. And he's like, "Mom, this is crazy."
But wait, you're going to tell him, right? But wait for the middle of the day and you'll feel it.
Yes, and not even the middle of the day. I mean, we just did about 5 rounds up. We paused, and then 5 rounds going to the front. And he was feeling more energized in that moment. Like, it changed his mood. Partially he was laughing, this crazy kooky thing that my mom's having me do. My husband was kind of still gardening and watching, and he was chuckling. So that was all part of the lightening of the mood. But as we know from energy, he went from a place where his energy was stagnant and wasn't moving, and energy not moving is the biggest issue with energy. When energy isn't moving, that's where it creates issues. And just, I mean, even physically, even if he was just doing that, never mind that you're opening and closing your minor chakras, so that's energizing your chakras. So it, on so many levels, the breath, the physicality of it, opening, closing your chakras, it raised his energy, and he felt good enough to go inside and get his shoes on and get out and start helping us. And then his mood continued to lift, and he was fine. He got out of it. So that's a funny personal note. Yeah.
And I didn't think about it, Nina. See, I learn every single day. The learning doesn't stop because I learned this from you, right? The chakra opening, the palm
Yeah.
chakras that you can open, and you fast open and you close.
Yeah.
And you just, I didn't think about it. Even in Bastrika, you have so much energy that's pumping into the body, but
Yeah.
you're also working with the energy centers because you're
Yeah.
opening some of these subtle energy centers that's allowing you to receive all that energy.
Yeah.
And as I have told, you and the other students on the call, that it's such an energizing practice.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be so careful about these pranayama practices, and that's why so many people are so skeptical about learning pranayama online. And I get it. I totally get it, because your energy can go really crazy, right? I mean, there's so many practices that can just lift up your energy, and then so many that can actually, bring you, really confine that energy in,
Mm-hmm.
and it can drive you crazy. And so I hear a lot of concerns sometimes about that you should be actually learning pranayama one-on-one with the teacher.
Wow.
And um, I don't know what you feel about that, because here we have like 80-90% of the course that was actually online. And I want to hear from a real student about this
Yeah. Well,
perception of pranayama should only be learned in the room with the teacher.
you know, sure. Is anything, well, most things there is always a benefit to the one-on-one. So even the difference between just being in a room where all these people are doing Kapalabhati and I'm doing it, and there I'm closing my glottis and I'm doing something that then leads to a long-term thing. And the other side of it, I was exposed to it, and coming into your class, I had experience with it, and I had felt moving energy, and I had felt kind of that stillness of the kumbhaka. So I think there's pros and cons to all of them. I don't think that anything has to be one way. I think when you are one-on-one, when we met in person, it was such a powerful experience for all of us. We loved it, meeting in person, and that is energy, right? We were then able to feel each other's energy and respond to each other's energy. And meeting Kelly, which was important because she's your co-teacher, those kinds of things. And I don't think it's reasonable to do a 6-month course where we meet for an hour every other Sunday.
Yeah.
That is going to be too challenging. So if it's, don't do it at all or do it online. I mean, for me, doing the readings, the fact that you recorded the sessions was really important, because then I can go back and watch them when I have a question or I wasn't sure if I was doing something right. And then on my own, doing it for those 2 weeks, it worked for me to do it that way. And I'm sure there would have been aspects of it that would have been better meeting just one-on-one and in person. And would that have really happened? Probably not. Could the two of us do every 2 weeks, just the two of us meeting? I mean, first of all, you'd have to charge like an enormous amount of money. Right? So, I think there's always different aspects. And I think in the world we live in today, it's not a time, where people could live with their teacher or be in the same town as their teacher and spend all this time just focusing on training and learning. That just doesn't work with today's lifestyle. There's something important that I want to tell you that I think is important for students and was a good lesson for me. And it teaches you humility. So we met in person and we figured out these 4 things or 5 things that I even wrote them down. I numbered them so I wouldn't forget, that I could try to stop the block. And I had done it once or twice successfully when we were all together, and I knew it would take practice. So I go home and I'm excited. I'm going to, I think I'm going to be able to get through this one and figure it out. And I start doing those things and practicing, and I'll get 2 breaths right, and then I'll hold my glottis again. And then I'll do a couple of breaths, and then I'll find myself, slumping a little, putting my hands forward again out of habit, and I pull it back. And I have to say, for the first week, I was really frustrated. And I would do 2 or 3 breaths right, and then I'd do like 3 breaths wrong. And then I'd say, you know what, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not practicing today. I'll do it tomorrow. And the voice in my head would say, why are you putting it off? And I'd say, shut up, voice in my head. Because I am. Because I was frustrated and I did put it off. And so I have to admit, there's the humility. Like, instead of, saying, no, this will benefit me. And, and then being gentle with yourself and being kind. And after 2 weeks of just doing it till I got frustrated, sometimes that meant only 3 breaths right and 5 breaths wrong. It did start to, slowly increase. And of course, I'm trying to practice what I teach people in my own energy work, which is, love and gratitude is high vibration. High vibration is good for your body. Frustration, resentment, all of the negative, emotions are low vibration, and that, you're a creator. You're creating all the time, and, you need to be on your own team. And so I would get frustrated and I would say, I should be doing this more. And I'd start to, get on myself. Are you being lazy? Are you, resisting this? What's happening? And I'd take a deep breath and, I'd say, Nina, you're wonderful and I love you. I accept that this is something that you're going to get to. You're building there. I thank you. Gratitude and love. Thank you for taking about 2 weeks to get to the point where I could take a bunch of breaths in a row. And it was this, being gentle with myself, first wanting to beat myself up, and then being gentle and saying, it's okay to take time. Maybe you just need time. And after those 2 weeks, I totally forgot about it and was just breathing right after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you.
So much more to it than just,
Yeah, I think you broke up a little bit, but I hear you. And this is such a great point that you brought up, Nina, because this is not a quick fix, right? Mm-hmm. This is a practice. It takes months and years to practice, and it's important to deal with your own frustrations, like wherever you are with breathwork. However you approach this practice, wherever you come from, like you came with 20 years of practice, right? Yet you had these experiences which made you frustrated. But you said it right, because it's all about being kind and being gentle to yourself, giving yourself, allowing yourself the time to
Mm.
being, listening to your body, being gentle with yourself. And that negative self-talk that we often do in our mind, that, hey, I shouldn't be doing it. I love that about you, Nina, that you are such a devoted practitioner. Like, I mean, you have practiced this so sincerely. And as I said to all the students from day one, um, you're going to hear a lot of background, my kids are recognize. As I told all the students from day one, that if you practice, you'll see the results, right? You'll see the results. It's not going to come immediately, but over time, you begin to build your own practice, and you begin to see how breathwork can actually really open up so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's, as an energy healer, everything is energy, right?
Yes.
Everything is energy vibrating at a certain frequency. So once you start experiencing the movement of the prana, which is the most important step of pranayama, is to get you in tune with your own life force. And as you know, Nina, you do really feel those movements, like those electrical movements through the body. You can direct it. And the advanced practices are really to redirect that prana into certain parts of the body. So you can now begin to heal. You have a powerful healing modality at your expense, at your disposal. You can invite it at any time, and you can begin to really take your life into directions that at this point is hard to imagine, right? It's hard to imagine unless you are ready to receive some of these practices.
Yeah, and I think it's important too with the be gentle with yourself. Especially in the first few weeks, there were times first I was sick, and I couldn't breathe when we were doing the Samavritri. Is that how you say it?
Samavritti, yes.
Yes. I was congested and I couldn't do it. It was so, like mucus. It was not happening. And then there were just weeks where I was super busy, and maybe I did it 4 times in 2 weeks. But what I found was, again, you go right to the self-saboteur. I'm not serious about this. I'm not doing this enough.
Yeah.
I'm letting Devendra down, all the different things. I'm letting myself down. I paid for this and I'm not getting what I should out of it. All of those things circle in your head. And, you have to, or it's better, you don't have to do anything, but it's better for you when you are mindful and you remember, this is lowering my vibration. I'm always safe. Everything is always the way it needs to be. It's okay. You can forgive yourself and you can raise your vibration and go forward with, this is the reality of what's happening. And when you let go of all of the extra baggage of the blame and the shame and the guilt and the regret and all that stuff that we just every day dump on ourselves, when you can find the moment of clarity, because sometimes you can't, but when you can, you feel stronger and you can say, hey, I did it for 4 times in the past 2 weeks and it felt good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what happens is, what I found from my experience is, the more I did it and the more weeks we went through and the more I learned, the more I didn't feel like this is something I have committed to, but this is something I want to do. And so if I couldn't do it first thing in the morning, when I came home from my yoga practice or my workout or whatever, sit down in my office and I would say, I want to do pranayama right now and I'm going to do it. And I started doing it more, not thinking of it as it's on my to-do list. It's something that I have told myself in the world that I want to do. It's something I enjoy doing. And that has taken time to get to a place, through, what'd you say, 5 months we've been doing this?
Yeah, we started January, right? So we are in our 5th month. Right.
Yeah, so it's only in this past month, the month of May, that I have said, I want to find joy in my life, right? We take so little time to find joy. And this is joyful to me. Meditate, doing my pranayama. First, I do a little bit of neck, head, and then I meditate. And it is a joyful experience that I love, and I'm giving it to myself.
I just can keep talking to you for hours. I am so grateful that you are part of this group, and um, I'm just grateful to have a student like you. And you are a teacher to me as well, because I learned so much from you. And and with energy healing, experience in energy healing, um, I cannot thank you enough for being part of this journey with me.
Yeah.
And it's just the beginning, right? So we have a long way to go. There's so much more we can do. The world need healers, as you know, right? I
Yes.
mean, this science of healing, like 1,000 2,000 years ago, there were so many healers. Even like 500 years ago, I'd say this, the world was full of healers. And
Yeah.
now as technology has taken over, we have all become so busy in our life,
Yeah.
in our own careers, that the world is really lacking healers. And breathwork and energy healing is something that can really change your life and change you from the inside. And I am again so grateful that you're part of this journey. And I thank you, my friend, for spending the time with me today.
Well, thank you for everything you've taught me. I appreciate it and I am very grateful too.
Thank you, Nina. You have a wonderful day. Bye.
Namaste.